Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, Mighty Bjorn, and today for you, I have the 58th episode of Community Steel. We're going to dive on into it today. We're going to kick today's video off with the ZSU57, and this is from Average User. He's got this thing weighing in at 47.6 tons. It is actually armed with the twin 57 millimeter guns. And they are autocannons, and they do rip shit apart. They have 152 millimeters of penetration, so while not on the high scale of the penetration, probably on the high scale of penetration for all the autocannons I've seen so far throughout my episodes of Community Steel. And this is for the late war period. I really like how this is designed. It looks like how it's supposed to look. It's got the T-55 hull while it's got the ZSU turret. As well, it's got the 57 millimeter guns and the radar system. Or at least I believe that's radar system. Maybe it's a searchlight, I can't remember. You know what, I think I'm wrong, I think it's a searchlight, but I'm old and shit, folks, I can't remember everything. And it's got, just look at that gun elevation. You can point the guns just about straight up in the air, which is actually realistic for the vehicle. While this vehicle wouldn't be used to shoot down helicopter or jets, its primary role was doing things like shooting down helicopters and low, slow flying planes. And yeah, it would do the job. The next one I have here for you is the Ex17 UPG from Lucifer Morningstar. Yeah, the devil himself apparently is now making tanks for Community Steel. This weighs in at 30.74 tons. And yeah, pretty gnarly looking tank. Kind of got some Soviet influence, it looks like. It's got a 100 millimeter gun with 342 millimeters of penetration. That is the most penetration I've ever seen on a 100 millimeter gun. Actually, that may just be the most penetration I've ever seen on any vehicle I've featured so far in Community Steel. And honestly, I'm not really sure how he was able to achieve that much penetration. So if anybody's got any insight, I'll more than gladly see. This is also for the late war period as well. Now, the one thing is, even though it does seem like it's got some Soviet influence, it actually does have a muzzle brake. Although some of them do. This one's just kind of small, and it's more towards the middle of the gun than towards the end of the gun. So kind of more like a T-62 influence gun, if you will. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty cool tank. I like how he did the road wheels, and he even did the bars that would actually hold the road wheels on the outside of the tank there. As you can see, one of the sets of bars is empty, while the other one actually does have road wheels mounted in it. Well, spare road wheels. Got a really low shape here. Nice how he mounted the M2 on top of the turret. And it even has the good old Soviet log, although I don't think it's actually wide enough for this tank. Either ways. The next victim we have here is from Silence, and this is the Hyena Mark III. Now, he's actually got a series of these. There's tank destroyers and etc. I think there's even an SPG variant. But this is his mid-war version. It's a medium tank. It weighs in at 28.35 tons. It is armed with an 88 millimeter gun. So a powerful 88 millimeter gun on a medium tank for the mid-war period with 210 millimeters of penetration. I can see some German influence in here. Primarily German. It's almost like he took the Yaketiger and shrunk it down, or made kind of maybe used influences from the Panther. It's got external fuel tanks as well. It's actually got quite a few external fuel tanks on it. And then the 88 millimeter gun, 210 millimeters of penetration. That is incredible for a mid-war period tank. The only thing about this is when I was doing my testing is the armor really wasn't extremely reliable. It would have its moments where it was pretty good, but it also had its moments where it would fall short. So it's really based on what you're going up against. But, you know, that's going to be pretty much any tank when it comes to armor. Now, the armor is sloped, including the side armor, too, to increase its effectiveness. But, anyway, let's move on to the next one. And the next one here is also from Silence, and this is his Hyena Mark 6C, weighs in at 44.69 tons. It's armed with a 105 millimeter main gun with 292 millimeters of penetration, and this one really cranks up the mobility and the penetration. Now, he's got this for the late war period, but I do believe this is more of a maybe early mid-Cold War period tank, something around the time of, say, like the AMX-30 and the T-62. Now, the gun depression really wasn't the best on this, and I did have some issues with hill climbing, but not always, so it was based on what it was. As you can see here, I'm having a hell of a time trying to get the gun depression to work for me. Now, armor-wise, the armor was fairly effective. The gun, I don't know. I would have imagined the gun being more accurate. Probably a part of me just being old and shit. But I would have expected it to shoot more straight than it did. I felt like the 88 millimeter gun on his Mark III actually was better accuracy-wise than what this 105 is. But what can I say? I mean, in general terms, it worked out fine for me. The tank looks good, I think. I like the camouflage paint. I like how he did the side skirts and everything else to it. Just an overall good-looking tank, in my opinion. Now, the next one here is the MB3 A19 Blade from Aetherleaf. And this thing is just a behemoth. It weighs in at 99.49 tons. It's armed with a 146 millimeter main gun, and it's got 405 millimeters of penetration. Yeah, remember how I said the EX17 had the highest penetration I featured so far? Well, this one just beat that. This is now the king of the battlefield when it comes to penetration. And it's got a 75 millimeter gun with 221 millimeters of penetration. The 75 millimeter gun is coaxial to the main gun. This is for the late war period. However, I did actually have quite a few issues with this. It does also have a machine gun. The pintle mounted machine gun actually does work. But there was a lot of odd design choices I seen here. One is, well, I guess that's a remote station for the 50 cal because no one's going to be able to reach that from the turret. Now, the one thing I do think that's interesting is he's got the middle raised, the middle of the turret raised, which would increase gun depression because it gives more room for the breech block as well as loading to be done. But he's got the, as you can see there, the sides of the turret are actually sloped down. And what that does is that reduces the overall size of the turret, which would actually allow the turret to have a lighter weight. But that's neither here nor there on the design. I just think it's a cool design choice that I've yet to see on any, that I believe on any vehicles that I've featured in Community Steel. I have seen it on some Real World tanks though, and that's usually what the basis for that is. The tracks I feel could be wider. It would help with the ground pressure, but yeah, there you go. It's not bad. Now, the next vehicle I have here is the Yaketiger. Well, actually, it's a Yaketiger. And this is from Wilhelm Bergdorf. And it weighs in at 61.31 tons, which I think is roughly the accurate weight for the Yaketiger. Although I think it's light. Not by much. I think it's light by about 7 tons. Not much. 7 tons, that's still quite a bit of weight. But it is armed with the 128 millimeter main gun. It's got 310 millimeters of penetration. Great penetration, I have to say. It is for the late war period. Obviously, it's a Yaketiger. Now, the one downfall of this thing is, like, it's got really ridiculous mobility. Probably better mobility than it should, for sure. But the gun reload speed is just oof. It is so slow reloading this thing. You might as well fire a shot, go cook an egg. And of course, a part of that is, well, not everything's properly implemented yet in Sprocket. I mean, the Yaketiger had a crane system to load the main gun. And, well, we don't have operational cranes that we can place internally into our vehicles yet. So, yeah, that's neither here nor there. The armor actually held up very superbly. Even I know it's holding up really well against these tanks. These tanks are not what I'm talking about. I'm talking bigger stuff like Yaketigers, other Yaketigers, the Ferdinand, etc. Tanks that do have a lot of penetration. He does actually have the engine deck pretty well modeled, looks fairly accurate to me, as well as he also has the gun mantlet mounted and modeled. And once again, that looks fairly proper for the Yaketiger. So realistically, the only thing I feel that's off is the mobility. Well, other than that, great vehicle. I like the design. The camo looks great. There's actually a camo you'd have to download with this, and it looks just really good. It looks like it belongs on the Yaketiger. Now, the next one I have here is, well, it's a thick boy.
Damn, boy, he's thick! Boy, that's a thick-ass boy! Damn! Ba-ba!
Yeah, this is the Biber E from Fischler. I think I pronounced that name wrong. It's something very close to that, the pronunciation, though. But this weighs in at 511.69 tons. I believe this may be the heaviest tank I've ever featured on Community Steel so far. Now, I do see some mouse influence in this for sure. It just, look how just ginormous this thing is. The mobility is god-awful. I didn't anticipate good mobility, though, when I see in the weight. However, it did cross terrain fairly good for the most part, until it came to hill climbing anyway. It is armed with a 160 millimeter main gun with 414 millimeters of penetration. So now this holds the record for penetration of all the vehicles I have featured so far in Community Steel. It also has a 61 millimeter coaxial with 160 millimeters of penetration. And this is for the late war period. And just look how huge this thing is. Now, that being said, it is definitely well modeled. And probably, my guess, if you thinned out the armor and tweaked various areas, you could definitely use this as a mouse, or as at least a mouse clone, because it does look fairly similar to a mouse. But anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap up today's episode with that. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much for tuning in. And folks, if you want to give me additional support, check out my Patreon page and throw me a couple shekels. I need some coffee so I can keep doing this stuff at 3 in the morning when I got to go to work at 7. Anyway, folks, thanks again for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day.